Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. We're trying to connect with Mike Jensen from the Philadelphia Inquirer. He'll hop on board in just a second. Chris, who's back in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios, will get in my ear when Mike Jensen from the Philadelphia Inquirer is able to pick up. Right now in the NCAA Tournament, Louisville is playing Jacksonville State. Louisville is up by a score of 40-31. That game just got started in that second half as Louisville is a number 2 seed. Louisville does have an easy road to get to the Elite Eight and then potentially the Final Four in that top right bracket of the NCAA Tournament. I'm not a big fan of this Louisville team, but when I was talking to a few people that we had on last week breaking down that bracket, they did make out that point that Louisville does have a very easy seed in a road in this NCAA Tournament. We'll update you on some other scores in the final minutes right now. Baylor, New Mexico State is coming to a close. Baylor was able to get the victory, or they're in process of getting the victory over New Mexico State, as that game is in the NCAA Tournament. We also mentioned Seton Hall, as Seton Hall, I thought it was not a good call by the referees, and they lose to Arkansas, so a tough loss for Kevin Willer's squad. At halftime, SMU is trying to represent the American Athletic Conference and punch through into the second round. That's 38-30, SMU up at half, up against USC. The number 1 seed, North Carolina Tar Heels, who's my pick to win the entire NCAA Tournament, right now is tied with Texas Southern, who's 23-11 on the year. That is a 1-16 game. Oregon was able to beat Iona earlier today, 93-77. And moving on, Michigan. How about the story of Michigan and what this Michigan team has been able to do? And Michigan is now going to the round of 32. Michigan is a 7 seed, knocked off Oklahoma State. There was a shot at the buzzer, and that made it a 1-point game for a victory for the Michigan Wolverines. And later on tonight, as we got some more games in progress as well coming up, and we'll have a few games later on tonight, obviously, in the NCAA Tournament. You have Creighton and Rhode Island, Kansas, UC Davis, Dayton, and Wichita State. And there's some reports that Wichita State could be close to going to the American Athletic Conference. I think that would be a good move for the American in terms of basketball as they try to increase their brand in the AAC. But the job Marshall has done at Wichita State, 30-4, and they're just grossly underseeded as a 10 seed. Duke, Troy later on tonight, Kansas State, Cincinnati, Michigan State, Miami, Northern Kentucky, going up against Kentucky, Marquette, South Carolina as well. And then the final game tonight is going to be Kent State and UCLA. So hopefully we can connect in a few seconds with Mike Jensen of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Chris, it's all right. You go in that other room, and if you want to use the phones and try to get Mike Jensen on, as we'll try to get him on from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mike does a really good job, and I want to get his perspective on Princeton and also Villanova, as Princeton does go down yesterday to Notre Dame, and Villanova's going on to the second round to face Wisconsin. And now joining us is Mike Jensen from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mike, Zach Gelb, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Appreciate a few minutes, and how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Let's first start off with the more fresh story, and that is Seton Hall. As the ending of that game to Arkansas, there was a flagrant foul. Seton Hall was down by 1 point. What did you think of the job of the officials in that game, Mike?
Well, I'm sure the officials for 39 minutes were fine. Then they were idiotic at the end. And, you know, I mean, when you get a chance to decide a call and then review a call and you still decide that, you know, grabbing a guy, yeah, okay, it was a little harder than a grab and the guy went down, but that's going to decide the game. You're going to give a flagrant one. You're going to give him the ball with, at that point, what was it, a 1 point game or a 2 point game? And basically turn it into a 2-possession game plus the ball in the last seconds. You've just decided the game. And that call, I mean, how many times have we seen a guy grab a jersey as opposed to going for a ball and it's just a foul call? It's like, give me a break. Come on.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Kevin Willer's squad, they go down back-to-back years in the opening round of the NCAA Tournament. And this one's heartbreaking compared to last year when it was just a blowout. And I know in addition to the foul, they're going to be looking at the 8 missed free throws. But, Mike, let's first start off with Princeton, and let's get into them. Yesterday, Devin Kennedy had a shot, a wide-open 3, and they would have won the game for Princeton, who was only down 1. Did you have a problem with the shot selection, or were you fine with it?
Personally, I am completely fine with that. I mean, I have issues with different shot selections, but not that one. I mean, that's a good shot for him and for their team. And at that point, you take the open shot, thinking that you're going to get something easy. I understand the idea of going to the hole, but that's not a bad shot. I didn't have an issue with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. And also, they didn't have a timeout. Like, some people forget about that as well. And they did try to, it looked like Amir Bell did try to start to drive at first. But then when you have Kennedy wide open, I was more than fine with the shot selection. In an ideal world, yes, I get what people are saying. You want to drive it to the hole. But that was Princeton's
Sure.
game plan going into this. They were going to live and die from the three. And yesterday, the shots just weren't falling for them.
Yeah, I thought on the one hand, early on they took it to Notre Dame. They drove and it was successful. I thought they had, their game plan was smart that way, since Notre Dame, doesn't protect the rim as well as some other teams. It's not necessarily a strength of Notre Dame's. And honestly, Princeton's strong defense obviously made it a great game to the end. I thought, give Princeton credit for basically Notre Dame showing up with their C game is what it seemed like. I did not think it was a good matchup for Princeton. It turned out to be a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, because a lot of the two teams that played yesterday, they're pretty similar in their brand of basketball. And the Irish are just, as we know, a better basketball team and have more experience going to back-to-back Elite Eight appearances. How far do you like the Irish going this year, even though they had a bad performance yesterday?
Yeah, I think they are a good enough offensive team that they could absolutely go on another run. Gonzaga would be a really good Sweet 16 game. West Virginia, to me, is a toss-up. So I think they are going to be in a bunch of toss-up games, and they're sort of used to that, playing in the ACC, where every night's sort of like that. So I'm not necessarily predicting them to go to the Final Four. I didn't predict them to go to the Final Four. I predicted Arizona, but I don't think anyone's going to say, "Oh, good, we play Notre Dame tonight."
You had Arizona. Who else did you have in your Final Four?
I had Duke. Cincinnati was my wild card, and I had Kansas.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I like people that take chances in their bracket. Yesterday, I was telling everyone take Middle Tennessee. I took them in a suicide pool, and I ended up winning with them. So Mike Jensen from the Philadelphia Inquirer with us right now. Just getting back to Princeton, though, Mike, this current state of the Ivy League. We've seen the Ivy League give the big Power 5 conferences those competitive runs in these first games of the NCAA tournament. How do you evaluate the current state of the Ivy?
Well, it's strong, and I'm not even sure that this was, a high point year, because a lot of these teams were fairly young. And I know, and that worked to Princeton's favor. Even with injuries, they were by far the best team in the league. Obviously, they showed it regular season and postseason. So they were 17-0. So they proved that. But I think the talent level of Harvard, Yale, Penn is going to be up in the next few years. Obviously Harvard has been up, and just and will be up again as the recruiting classes come in for those schools in particular. So I think it's a high water period for Ivy League basketball.
Were you an advocate of the Ivy League tournament, the inaugural Ivy League tournament?
I'm okay with the Ivy League tournament because I like having more meaningful games. I would tweak it, and I would give top seeds more advantage. I think the Patriot League is a better model where you're talking about home courts. Honestly, it would have cost Penn this year, but I'm fine with 3 instead of 4. I kind of like 4 instead of 8, to tell you the truth. I like having something to play for and having a watermark where, no, you're not good enough, that you can't just be the 8th best team and get in and win a couple and all of a sudden be playing for a tournament bid. Having 4 is really kind of interesting. Now, I would argue 4 or 3 that having the championship on the home teams on the higher seeds court, you basically guarantee yourself a crowd because people are going to be excited, and those teams have earned it. I understand that they want to have this sort of festival thing where the Ivy League comes together, and that's all fine. But honestly, other than the Palestra, I don't consider them to have the buildings to support it, and I don't think they're going to go to the Palestra every year.
Down deep, because you heard Mitch Henderson say that he really did like the Ivy League tournament, and a lot of other coaches in the Ivy echoed those sentiments as well. But I had Bill Carmody on last week and also Sidney Johnson, 2 former coaches of Princeton, and they hate this concept of an Ivy League tournament. Down deep, do you think the coaches in the Ivy really do like this the idea of a Ivy League tournament.
Well, I think you talk to Princeton coaches, and you talk to they're taking it from a viewpoint of 14-0 Princeton this year. I'm sure Brown, Columbia, Yale, Penn, they all liked it this year. So when you have more of a chance to do something, then there are going to be more people that like it. I mean, it's simple as that. The only ones who would have really questioned it this year on the men's side were Princeton and maybe Harvard, and on the women's side, it would have been Penn and Princeton who had to do it again kind of thing, especially Penn women this time after winning the regular season. So I understand that they were the last group left with tradition, but and I'll make you an analogy and see if you buy it. I mean, the English Premier League in soccer is pure. Everyone plays each other home and home. The winner's the champion, and that's all good. Except they have so many levels of things they're playing for over there, where top X go to the Champions League and then go to the UEFA Cup, and then there's relegation at the bottom. So almost every game is meaningful for almost every team. Here, Penn would have been 0-6 in the Ivy League and done. That's it. Season over. Well, that's I like this better. Sorry.
I never thought I'd be talking soccer with you, Mike.
Oh, I covered World Cups. I can talk soccer with you for the rest of the show if you want me to.
No, my big physical body frame, I never was a soccer player, never been a fan of the sport. So let's go to Villanova, the defending national champions. Last night, Jay Wright was clearly not happy with his team's effort in the first half when they were only up by 1 against Mount St. Mary's. Early on with Villanova, what did you realize out of them out of the gate last night?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think sometimes those Mount St. Mary's type teams are the teams that give them the most trouble, where all of a sudden Villanova, instead of being the smaller, quicker team, is supposed to be the larger, more physical team, and that's usually not their game. And I saw, they struggled against Western Michigan, they struggled against DePaul. Clearly, it wasn't just the opponent; they weren't shooting well, and sounds like Jay was getting on their effort as well. Like everyone else, if they play like that first half again, then instead of being up 1, they're going to be down in a hole. And not saying that they can't come back from holes. They have many times. They can go on a run against anybody quickly. But that game ain't going to cut it.
We all know how much Chris Jenkins has meant to this program just by looking at that shot and the way that last year ended. But are you at all concerned with the shooting performance that you saw last night of Chris Jenkins moving forward?
Well, I would say not necessarily last night, but it's been a series of games now, so you can't just say, okay, he'll get him next time. And certainly, his form looks fine. I'm thinking it's a little more of a psychological slump than a physical, technique breaking down kind of thing. On DEFCON, 1 to 10, I guess I put it at about a 5 level of concern, because I think he can get going at any time, and they have so many other shooters. Certainly, you don't want Jenkins cold throughout the tournament. That's obvious, but he can do enough other things that as a matchup guy, you got to guard him out there. Then he can get past you, and he can, make it a tough matchup for an opposing 4-man, say. So he's not suddenly a dead spot that you don't want on your team if he can't make a shot. But that said, when he's making shots, they go up on 2 levels, not just 1 level.
Tomorrow I do like Villanova to beat Wisconsin in Buffalo, but I could definitely see why this presents a tough matchup because of the size of Nigel Hayes and Ethan Happ, and then also the experienced guard that Wisconsin does have and having some big moments in the NCAA tournament. Do you like Villanova tomorrow, or are you feeling Wisconsin in the upset?
Well, I mean, I don't know that anyone outside Wisconsin is just going to say they're feeling the upset. I completely agree with you. It's a tough matchup, and this isn't the normal kind of 8 seed that you expect to see. This team came in second in the Big Ten regular season, came in second in the Big Ten in the postseason. I have no idea why they're an 8 seed, not like a 6 seed. But that's the way the committee rolled with it this time. And like you said, they've got, they can hit the boards, and Villanova usually does okay with those kinds of teams because they're a pretty good team rebounding team. Villanova, I mean, so that part, but a little bit of contrast in styles, and we'll see how that goes. And Wisconsin doesn't turn the ball over much, so that's not bad. Villanova's the better shooting team, and usually the MO for Villanova is, a clunker that they survive is followed by their A game. So, we'll see if that holds. So I would pick it that way, but I just see from now on each step of the way, because, not to get ahead of ourselves, but if they get past Wisconsin, you're talking about the Virginia-Florida winner. Well, that's nothing easy. And then, we'll see if SMU wins today and whether they end up giving Baylor a run and the winner plays Duke. Well, that little part of the bracket, there's nothing easy there. So, Villanova, they get to Phoenix, they will have earned it.
Last night I was sitting next to Kevin Cooney, who you know very well, at the game, and we were talking about the AAC a little bit when it looked like Villanova was clearly going to run away with this thing up by 20 points. And the AAC right now is not a strong basketball conference. Yes, teams like SMU and Cincinnati may go on a little bit of a run here in the NCAA tournament, but then you see this story this morning that Wichita State could possibly be joining the American. Your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, Pete Thamel wrote a very complete story and made it clear that this could happen this offseason or a year or two from now. Then he wasn't claiming that, done deal, press conference scheduled, not that kind of thing. My thoughts on it are it's very good for the AAC. The AAC should very simply, if you can get a quality basketball program like Wichita State, you sign them up quickly. I get why Wichita State would say, we want to be in a league where a good third-place season gets us in. We want to do what Creighton did, and it has worked for Creighton. Well, I get that completely. And from it makes a lot more sense to have Wichita State in your league than it does a Tulane in your league if you're the AEC. So if you add, quality basketball there, obviously SMU has been doing it. Cincinnati always does it. The league certainly needs Temple and UConn to get back up to where Temple and UConn have been, and then you're a really fine basketball league.
Greg Marshall's been at Wichita State for a nice period of time, and he's done an exceptional job with that program. If they move to the American, could it make it a little bit more inclined to leave maybe Wichita State?
Make him leave? I would think it would be more inclined to make him stay. He's obviously a guy who's, a lot of schools have kicked the tires on because he's just a very, very good coach. But it's hard when you know that, Thamel in a story pointed out that, they weren't sure with only 4 losses that they were in if they had lost in their conference tournament. So that's the sort of the impetus there. Now, Greg Marshall may pull the trigger and end up going, I would think Indiana would give him a real look on their list, and we'll see if he's there, whether if they could join the AAC and he wouldn't be there. Let me put it this way. I would think a decision like that, the school's got to say, where are we going to be after Greg Marshall is the whole point of why you would make a move like that, having nothing to do with him at all.
For sure. The only reason I asked it, because I know it could sound a little bit bizarre because you're upgrading in conference, but just because of the change, maybe he says, all right, maybe it's just time for me to make a change as well.
Yeah, I'm going to guess one has nothing to do with the other, to be honest with you. If there's a job that he decides is right for him, I assume he'd pull the trigger, and same way, whichever conference he's in, he's a confident enough guy that he's going to think he's going to be in the NCAA tournament, whichever the league they're in.
Mike, last one before we let Mike Jensen run of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I get a lot of conversation with Temple fans, and the Temple fan right now, and we know it's an up-and-down fan base, but they're not too pleased with Fran Dunphy, and they got killed with injuries this year. But some people start to wonder how many more years will Fran Dunphy be the head coach at Temple? How do you approach that type of question?
Well, I mean, I'd start with say, okay, they've got to get going again last year. I mean, anyone who wasn't happy with this year, they have a right not to be happy. And anyone who wants to say, okay, it's been 3 out of 4 years that we haven't been in the tournament. Well, I remember Jay Wright saying to me once, for a freshman who comes in and their 4 years is the only 4 years they know. So never mind that, and this was after he had been to a Final Four, but they had dropped. And we were talking when they were at that point. Well, the same way with Temple. The last 4 years they've been to one tournament, so that was the experience of the seniors who just graduated. So big freshman class coming in, and point guard presumably coming back healthy. I mean, obviously, to me, they just turned out not to be a team without Josh Brown. So let's see where you go. If they're still, if it's still a really, really tough year. That was a very un-Temple-like, very un-Dunphy-like team this year. If we see that again, then, there are going to be real problems, issues, questions, et cetera, et cetera. But, this year was certainly, never mind not the norm, it was the drastic exception. In the past, when they've had really difficult years, usually I tend to pin it on, well, it was because of that guy. Well, this was more than that. It was one injury, and then a couple of guys, because Trey Lowe, obviously, you lost your starting backcourt that you had expected, from the previous February. All of a sudden, neither guy is there, and that was tough. But, you can't just whistle past the graveyard. Obviously, it was a very tough year at Temple.
Mike, great stuff. Appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, have a great time up there and safe travels home.
You got it. Thanks so much. Mike Jensen from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Before we take a break, let me just be something very clear on Fran Dunphy. I don't think the Owls should get rid of Fran Dunphy. I know some people say that, but I think the Owls could return and have a nice little go at it next year. But hey, that's how the cookie crumbles right now. A lot of fans are upset. Zach Gelb Show will be back right after these short messages.